This security guard kicked Keanu Reeves out of a restaurant, but had no idea Keanu was the owner. It was a quiet Tuesday evening at Leclerc, one of the most luxurious and exclusive restaurants in all of Los Angeles. Inside, waiters glided across the marble floor. Crystal glasses sparkled under golden lights, and every table buzzed with quiet conversations about hedge funds, movie deals, and private schools. Then, without warning, the glass doors slid open and in walked a man who looked completely out of place. He wore a faded black hoodie, tattered jeans, and scuffed brown boots. A baseball cap shadowed his face, and a short beard masked most of his expression. He walked with calmness, yet everyone could feel the shift in the air. Heads turned, and eyebrows rose. The motadi froze, and Marcus, the security guard standing by the host's podium, stepped forward like a soldier guarding a gate. "Sir," Marcus said sharply, his hand already moving to his earpiece. "Do you have a reservation?" The man looked up. His eyes were calm, voice soft. "No, I just wanted to stop in for a moment. My grandmother used to talk about this place." Marcus blinked, then narrowed his eyes. "That's not how it works. This is a 5-star establishment. Reservations only. And we have a strict dress code." "I understand," the man said, his tone respectful. "I won't be long." "You can't be here," Marcus snapped, his voice rising. "You'll make the guests uncomfortable." Laughter erupted from a nearby table. A man in a gray suit nudged his date. "Did someone let the janitor in?" he joked, loud enough for others to hear. More giggles followed. A few phones were raised, ready to snap a picture or a video, just in case. Still, the man didn't flinch. He glanced around the room as if absorbing something deeper than the chandeliers or the wine glasses. His eyes softened, almost nostalgic. He turned back toward the front. "I'll just look for a second if that's all right." Marcus stepped in front of him. "It's not. Now turn around before I have to escort you out." Behind the stand, Emily, a young hostess with soft features and curious eyes, watched the scene unfold. Something about the man made her pause. She had seen entitled celebrities and snobbish elites come through those doors every night. This man was different. Humble, gentle, and strangely familiar. She stepped forward. "Sir, maybe I can." "Emily." Marcus cut her off firmly. "He doesn't belong here." The man gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for your kindness. I won't cause trouble." Just then, an elderly woman at the front slipped slightly on the marble floor. Without hesitation, the man reached out and caught her arm gently, steadying her. "Oh, thank you," she said, looking up at him with surprise. There was something familiar in his face. Marcus took another step forward. "That's it. You need to leave." The man looked at him and said calmly, "There's no need to touch me. I'm already leaving." But before he could take a full step, a small voice rang out from across the room. "Mum." A young boy stood up on his chair, pointing. "That's him. That's the man from the movie. The one with the dog." Silence. The clinking of silverware stopped. Glasses paused mid-air. "What movie?" his mother whispered, embarrassed. "You know, John Wick. He had a dog, and then he started beating up the bad guys." A ripple passed through the restaurant. Conversations died. Faces turned. People squinted, leaned in, whispered. Marcus blinked. Emily stared. The man lifted his head just enough for the light to catch his face. "Oh my God," someone near the bar whispered. "That's Keanu Reeves." Gasps followed. A woman dropped her phone. A man choked on his wine. For a few stunned seconds, no one moved. Emily's mouth fell open. "Is it really?" Keanu gave the boy a soft smile and a nod. "Take care, little man," he said quietly. He turned back to Marcus and Emily. "Thank you both. I'll be going now." And just like that, without raising his voice or revealing his status, Keanu Reeves turned and walked out the same door he came in, alone, unbothered, and heartbreakingly humble. Inside the restaurant, the air had shifted. The weight of guilt hung thick. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wind in tall grass. Was that really him? Why didn't anyone recognize him? Did we just mock Keanu Reeves? Marcus stood frozen, his face pale. He looked like a nobody. That's exactly the problem, Emily muttered. And we treated him like one. Outside, just around the corner from Leclerc, Keanu Reeves stood beneath a dim street lamp. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside, a faded photograph, his grandmother, smiling. I finally saw it, Grandma, he whispered, but I wish you hadn't been right. He closed the locket, tucked it away, and disappeared into the night as quietly as he had arrived. Back inside, the atmosphere remained heavy. Guests avoided each other's eyes. No one was laughing anymore, and none of them knew ... that this was only the beginning. The restaurant felt colder after Keanu walked out. No one said it aloud, but the silence screamed louder than any apology. Forks clinked awkwardly against plates. Conversations became whispers, and all eyes kept flicking toward the front doors as if he might walk back in. Emily stood frozen behind the host stand. Her chest was tight, her thoughts raced. She had felt something about him the moment he walked in. A calmness, a quiet dignity. And now, all she could feel was shame for not doing more. For not stopping Marcus, for not knowing Marcus, meanwhile, was pacing near the entrance, checking the cameras on the tablet in his hands. His jaw was clenched. His pride had taken a hit. But his voice, when he finally spoke, still carried arrogance. I mean, what was he even doing here, dressed like that? Marcus muttered. He set himself up for it. Emily turned to him slowly, her eyes cold. You put your hands on Keanu Reeves, Marcus scoffed. He didn't say who he was. He shouldn't have to, she snapped. He turned to her, defensive now. You think I'm just supposed to treat everyone who walks in like royalty? Yes, Emily said, without blinking. Or at least, like a human being. Marcus's mouth opened, then shut. His hands dropped to his sides. He looked around, realizing half the restaurant staff had stopped what they were doing to listen. They weren't laughing either. Back in the kitchen, word was spreading. One of the chefs had caught the tail end of the scene, and was already texting a friend. The dishwasher, a quiet man named Luis, had paused mid-rinse, and just stood staring. At the door, shaking his head at table 6. The young boy who'd recognized Keanu sat quietly now, pushing a piece of bread across his plate. His mother leaned in. Are you sure it was him? She asked softly. The boy nodded. I know it was. Her lips pressed together. We laughed at him. The boy didn't answer. He didn't have to. Meanwhile, outside, Keanu sat on a bench. Down the block, he stared at the street, watching cars glide past in the dark. His fingers still held the little silver locket. His face was calm, but his eyes held the weight of 1,000 memories. He had been rejected before, in far worse ways, but this was different. He hadn't come for praise. He didn't want attention. He came to see the place his grandmother had once dreamed of visiting. She used to describe it to him like it was a palace made of stars. And now that he'd finally stood inside it, it had felt empty. Not the building, but the people. Back at Leclerc, the restaurant manager, Mr. Sterling, arrived. He was a tall man in a grey suit, with perfect hair and a fake smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had been called urgently after a few guests complained about the incident with the man at the door. What's going on? He asked. Already annoyed, Marcus explained in fragments. Some guy came in, looked like a bum, caused a small scene. Turns out he was Keanu Reeves, apparently. Mr. Sterling blinked. What? Emily stepped forward. It was him. I saw his face, so did half the room. Mr. Sterling looked around at the quiet tables, the uneasy faces, the servers, whispering in the corners. He rubbed his temples. We'll handle it, he said, waving a hand. Let's keep this quiet. No need for drama. Emily's eyes narrowed. Drama already happened. Sterling ignored her. He turned to Marcus. Next time, just check IDs if someone looks familiar, and be polite. Marcus nodded stiffly. But don't feel bad, Sterling added. He shouldn't have come in here looking like a drifter. Let's be honest. A voice came from behind. He didn't look like a drifter. He looked like someone who's lived through something. Everyone turned. It was Luis, the dishwasher, who had quietly stepped forward. It was the first time most people had heard him speak. He looked at Sterling. "I've washed dishes in this place for 3 years. No one ever thanks me. But he looked at me once. Right before leaving, and nodded, like I mattered." Sterling looked uncomfortable. "That's very touching, Luis." But Luis stepped forward again, gently but firmly. He mattered because he saw people, not clothes. Silence followed. Even Marcus looked away. Emily stepped beside Luis and nodded. "He shouldn't be remembered for being rich. He should be remembered for how he made us feel." Sterling huffed, trying to regain control. "All right, enough. Let's get back to work. This isn't a charity, it's a business." Outside, Keanu rose slowly from the bench and began walking. Not away but back. Toward the restaurant, not to confront, not to expose, but for someone else. Because in the moment of rejection, he had seen a spark of something real. Kindness he had seen her try. He passed the glowing windows and paused across the street. Inside, he saw Louise washing a tray of glasses. He saw Emily folding napkins at the host's stand, her face pale but proud. And then he turned away once more, disappearing into the night. Back inside, Sterling handed Marcus a warning slip. "Just in case this goes public," he muttered. Marcus nodded without emotion. Emily looked out the window, her thoughts still spinning. In her pocket was a napkin. On it, written in quick, neat handwriting, were 5 words. "Kindness doesn't go unnoticed." Okay. She hadn't seen him write it. She didn't even know when he'd slipped it to her. But now, holding it in her hand, she realized something. That man hadn't come for a meal. He had come to test something far more important, and most of them had failed. It was raining the day Keanu stood alone at the cemetery gate. He wore the same black hoodie he'd had for years, the same one he wore when he wasn't on movie sets or red carpets. But that day, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just a grandson, a broken one. She had been everything to him. Not just his grandmother, but his anchor, his moral compass, his quiet cheerleader. Her name was Lorraine. She raised him after his mother passed and his father disappeared. Their little apartment in Toronto was tiny, but it was filled with warmth, books, old music, and the smell of tea. "Kindness," she used to say, "is the only wealth that never runs out." Even when they had nothing, when meals were skipped and rent came late, Lorraine never let bitterness take root in their home. Instead, she filled Keanu with stories. Stories of good people, of compassion, of second chances. But there was one story she told again and again, about a restaurant called Leclerc. She'd never been there, couldn't afford it, but she had passed it once when visiting a friend in LA, and she remembered the chandeliers, the grand piano, the people dressed like they belonged in a dream. One day, she whispered to young Keanu, "When you're somebody, take someone there who's forgotten what it feels like to matter." At the time, he had laughed. He was a teenager, scraping by, riding buses, folding clothes at a dry cleaner. After school, becoming somebody felt like reaching for the stars with bare hands. But Lorraine believed. Years passed. Keanu's life took unexpected turns. Grief, rejection, small acting gigs that barely paid rent. But then came the phone calls, the scripts, the breakthrough roles. People began recognizing him. The name Keanu meant something now, but he never forgot the woman who believed first. He tried to bring her to Leclerc once. Years later, when he could finally afford it, but her health was failing by then. "My dream," she smiled gently, "was never the food. It was the feeling. I already feel it with you." She died the next spring. He hadn't spoken much about it in interviews. Some pain was too private for the spotlight, but the locket she left behind never left his side. It held her photo and a tiny paper heart she'd made, folded carefully into the back. On it, written in fading pen, "Don't forget where you came from. The world needs more gentle men." And so, Keanu made a silent vow. No matter how rich, no matter how famous, he would stay grounded. He would hold doors open. He would give up his seat on buses. He would listen more than he spoke. He would be kind even when the world wasn't, because that was her gift to him. Years later, when he finally bought part of Leclerc, not for business, but to quietly protect the staff who worked long nights unseen, he didn't tell anyone, not the press, not the guests. He wanted it to stay special, pure. He never expected to be treated like royalty when he walked in, but he didn't expect to be treated like trash either. Now, back in the present, Keanu walked slowly down a quiet street, the locket in his hand. His shoes were soaked from the evening mist, but he didn't seem to notice. His mind was full of memories, not of fame, but of her voice. He remembered her saying, "The real test is how you treat the ones who can do nothing for you." He had just been tested, and many had failed. But not all. Inside Leclerc, Emily sat on a bench in the hallway, staring at the napkin he'd left. She didn't understand how he'd had the time or why he'd left it for her, but the message felt like it was burning into her heart. Luis, still rinsing glasses, replayed the moment Keanu had looked at him. Just a nod, just a second. But it had felt like someone finally saw him, and in a small studio apartment across town. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, watching old clips on his phone. Keanu in interviews. Keanu visiting children in hospitals. Keanu sitting on sidewalks beside the homeless, offering food without cameras. He had misjudged someone, badly. His chest felt tight. He replayed the moment he'd grabbed Keanu's arm. The silence, the calmness, the humility. Why hadn't he recognized that as power? At that same moment, Keanu reached the steps of a small church, where he often stopped to light a candle for Lorraine. He entered quietly, unnoticed, and placed a single white flower beneath the altar. Then he sat, alone, his hands folded in thought. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. But he had learned something too. Even the kindest hearts can be overlooked in rooms full of noise. Back at Leclerc, Emily stood and walked into the kitchen. She looked at Luis and simply said, "We have to do better." He nodded. No more words were needed. The restaurant was still full of people, but it didn't feel grand anymore. It felt, hollow. All because one man walked in not for a table, but for a memory, and they had turned him away, but he hadn't left empty-handed. He had seen who still had light inside them, and he wouldn't forget. The next evening, Leclerc opened its doors as usual. Candles flickered on white tablecloths. Music floated in the air. But something was different. The staff walked slower. They spoke in softer tones. Guests noticed it, too. A strange tension hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't rise. Emily arrived early, holding the napkin Keanu had left her the night before. She kept reading the message over and over again. Kindness doesn't go unnoticed. She didn't know why it hit her so hard. Maybe because, in a place where people judged by shoes, cars, and watch brands, Keanu had seen something else. And now, she wanted to prove him right. Marcus stood by the door again, unusually quiet. His posture was stiff, but his confidence was gone. Every time a customer entered in casual clothes, he hesitated. He was afraid of making the same mistake again. As guests trickled in, a young man walked up to the door. He wore jeans, clean but faded. His jacket was too thin for the night air. His eyes were nervous. In his hand, he held a small note, written in red ink. Emily noticed him from behind the stand. "Hi there, do you have a reservation?" He nodded, holding out the note. I was told to come here. A man gave me this at the bus station this morning." She took the paper, her eyes widened. It was a gift certificate, signed KR valid. For one dinner, any table, no expiration. Emily smiled softly. "What's your name, Eli?" he said. "He told me this place would remind me I still matter." Marcus blinked. The guy with the beard. Real calm, gave me his sandwich and this card. Emily's heart skipped. "Keanu." Marcus stepped forward. "Are we really going to seat this guy?" Emily looked at him calmly. "Yes, he's our guest." She guided Eli to a table near the window. Other diners glanced, confused, but Emily didn't care. She laid the menu in front of him like he was a VIP. Luis, in the kitchen, peeked out and saw the scene unfold. He smiled to himself and returned to his sink. A few minutes later, Mr. Sterling walked in, frowning at the unusual seating. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing to Eli. Emily stood firm. "He's here because someone believed in him." Sterling narrowed his eyes. "This isn't a shelter." "No," she said, "it's a restaurant, where people eat, where people feel welcome, or they should." Sterling opened his mouth to argue but stopped. Something in her tone stopped him. He looked around. Other servers were nodding. Even a few customers were watching. He sighed. "Fine. One night." Meanwhile, Eli sat nervously, watching the menu. "I've never had food like this," he whispered, when Emily returned with water. "Then you're in for a treat," she said kindly. "What brought you to the city?" "My brother passed," Eli said quietly. "I came to collect his things. I haven't had a hot meal in days. I was sleeping in the bus station." Emily's heart clenched. "I'm sorry, I'm okay," he said. "But that man, he looked me in the eye. Said I was more than I thought I was." Emily felt her throat tighten. Keanu hadn't just given him food, he had given him dignity. A moment of humanity. That meant more than any dish on the menu. Back in the kitchen, Luis prepared the plate himself. He arranged it with care, placed a small flower on the side, and whispered, "For someone who matters." He passed it to Emily. As she served the plate, Eli looked up with tears in his eyes. "This is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a long time." "It's not charity," Emily said gently. "It's what you deserve." A few tables away, a woman who had laughed at Keanu the night before was now watching Eli. She whispered to her husband, "I think I owe someone an apology." The mood shifted. Guests smiled softly. Kindness was spreading. Later that night, when Eli finished his dessert, he stood up to leave. Emily followed him to the door. "Thank you," he said, "not just for the meal, but for seeing me." She nodded. "Someone saw you first. We're just passing it on." As he stepped out into the night, the same quiet hush returned to Leclerc, but this time, it wasn't tension, it was peace. Marcus stepped beside Emily. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She looked at him. "For what I did to Keanu," Marcus continued. "For not listening, for thinking respect had to be earned through money." Emily nodded once. "Apologize to the right person when you can. But start by changing how you treat the next one." He didn't argue. That night, when the last table was cleared and the candles were blown out, Luis taped something to the staff fridge in the back. It was a copy of the napkin. "Kindness doesn't go unnoticed, K." Beneath it, Luis wrote in black marker, "Let's be the reason someone believes in people again." And without a sound, the restaurant began to change. One guest, one meal, one heart at a time. Because Keanu hadn't needed a table. He had come to remind them who they were. It was Thursday evening, just 2 days after Keanu Reeves had been quietly pushed out of Leclerc. But tonight, the mood was different. The staff had started seeing people with new eyes. Emily smiled more. Luis hummed while he worked. Even Marcus held the door with unusual care. But they didn't know what was coming. At exactly 7:03 p.m., the front doors opened again. Keanu walked in. Same hoodie, same jeans, same calm presence. But this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. He walked straight to the host stand and looked at Emily, who froze with the water pitcher in her hand. Her eyes widened. "You came back." He gave a soft smile. "I had to return something." Before she could answer, the room caught on. A couple at table 9 whispered, "That's him. That's definitely him." The man at the bar turned. "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" A murmur rolled through the room like thunder. Phones lifted. Forks stopped clinking. Conversations halted. Luis peeked through the kitchen door, eyes wide. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, but this time, he didn't try to block the way. Instead, he swallowed hard. "Mr. Reeves." I'm so sorry for." Keanu raised his hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room. "You don't have to apologize in front of everyone," he said kindly. "Mistakes happen. What matters is what you do after." Marcus nodded slowly. His eyes burned, but he blinked fast to hold it back. Emily stepped around the podium. "Would you like a table?" Keanu smiled again. "Actually, I'd like to stand, just for a minute." He turned to face the restaurant. A hush fell over the crowd. He looked at the faces, some nervous, some guilty, some curious, and he spoke, not with anger, but with gentleness. "I came here because my grandmother once dreamed of this place. She never made it, but she talked about it like it was heaven on earth." He paused. "I walked in, dressed simply, not to test anyone, but because that's how I live. I wasn't looking for special treatment. I just wanted to feel the memory she left me." Silence. You could hear a pin drop. "And what I got was something unexpected," he continued. "I was judged, dismissed, pushed aside, but in the middle of that, a few people reminded me of something important." He looked at Emily, then at Luis, standing halfway out the kitchen door. "That kindness isn't dead. It just gets buried sometimes beneath fear or pride." Someone near the bar covered her mouth. Her eyes were red. "I'm not here to blame," Keanu said softly. "I've made mistakes too, but we all have a chance, every day, to choose who we want to be." He stepped back and placed something on the podium. It was the silver locket. He didn't open it. He just looked at it for a long second, then tucked it away again. A soft voice called out from one of the tables. "Why didn't you say who you were?" He turned toward the voice. "Because who I am shouldn't change how I'm treated. Nobody's name should." Murmurs of agreement echoed through the room. Keanu looked back at Emily. "Thank you for seeing me when others didn't." She wiped the corner of her eye quickly, then gave a small nod. Then he looked at Marcus. "You've got a hard job, I know that, and I know what it's like to make a snap decision. But don't let that decision define you. Let what comes next do that." Marcus was visibly shaken now. I will, I promise." Keanu stepped toward the center of the room. He took a deep breath, then said, "If anyone in this room felt uncomfortable when I walked in that night, ask yourself why. If anyone laughed when I was pushed out, ask yourself what that laugh cost you. Not to shame you, but to remind you." He paused, looked around, then finished. "Because how we treat strangers says more about us than it ever says about them." There was a silence so deep it felt sacred, and then, slowly, someone began to clap. It started with the woman who had whispered to her husband earlier. Then a young man near the back. Then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was on their feet. Applause filled the room, not loud and wild, but soft and meaningful. A tribute, not to a movie star, but to a man who had walked in quietly and changed everything. Keanu nodded once, almost like a bow, then smiled gently. "No need for applause," he said. "Just pass it on." He turned and began walking to the exit. But as he reached the door, Sterling, the manager, rushed in, breathless. Clearly, he had just heard what happened. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know you were back. If there's anything we can do to make it up to you, just say the word." Keanu looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said. Sterling leaned forward eagerly. "Of course, anything. Treat your dishwasher like you treat your VIPs, and listen to your hostess more. She already knows what matters." Sterling opened his mouth, but no words came out. Keanu gave him a simple nod, then walked out into the night. No limo, no paparazzi, just Keanu, still quiet, still kind. Inside, no one sat right away. They stayed standing. Some hugged, others cried. Emily clutched the napkin in her apron pocket, and for the first time in a long time, LeClaire felt like something more than a restaurant. It felt like a place where people could change. The next morning, LeClaire was all over the internet. Someone had recorded everything. Keanu's entrance, his speech, the silence that followed, the soft clapping, the way he disappeared quietly, like he always does. By sunrise, the video had hit over 5 million views. Keanu Reeves walks into a restaurant. What happens next restores your faith. In people, that was the headline, spreading like fire. People watched it on phones, in subways, in classrooms, on break rooms. Even people who had never seen one of his movies were crying by the end. And the comments poured in. I'll never forget the way he said, "Asterisko, we treat strangers," says more about us. This is the man the world needs. That hostess and the dishwasher deserve the world. By noon, reporters were calling. News vans parked outside Leclerc. The staff peeked through curtains, stunned. Emily stood at the host stand. With her phone buzzing non-stop, she looked up at Luis. "You've gone viral." He chuckled nervously. "Me? Why?" "You," she said softly. "Saw what no one else did." Luis shifted in his shoes. "I just washed dishes." "No," she said. "You noticed someone. That matters now more than ever." Marcus stayed in the back, eyes glued to the screen. He had watched the video a dozen times, not because of Keanu's speech, but to study himself. He saw the moment he shelved him, saw the pride in his own face, and the look of quiet disappointment. In Keanu's, his chest ached with shame. A knock came at the back door. Luis opened it. Asterisk. It was a young woman with a clipboard and a badge. "Hi, I'm from the city's Human Dignity Project. We saw the video. We'd like to nominate your team for a Community Kindness Award." Luis blinked. "An award? For what?" "For standing up," she smiled. "Especially you and your..." Hostess Lise didn't know what to say. Inside, the restaurant was busier than ever but different. Customers arrived not to show off, but to witness something. They spoke gently, they tipped well. One woman left a note on her bill that read, "This place changed something in me." Emily read it 3 times before placing it in her pocket. Across the street, Keanu sat in an old diner sipping coffee. No one had noticed him yet. The waitress poured him a refill and smiled. "You look tired, sweetheart." He smiled back. "I'm okay, just thinking." She slid a free muffin onto his plate. "On the house. You look like someone who deserves it." He didn't say anything for a second. Then, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Back at Leclerc, Sterling sat with Marcus in the office. "We need to do damage control." Sterling muttered. Marcus shook his head. "It's not about damage, it's about growth. I messed up, I know that. But I'm ready to do better." Sterling looked up. "Are you saying that because the cameras are watching?" "No," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Because someone wasn't watching, and still treated me like I mattered." Sterling didn't respond right away. Then, finally, he said, "Start with the staff, own it." Marcus nodded. Later that night, he stood in the staff room, Emily, Luis, the servers, the cooks, everyone was there. Marcus cleared his throat. "I want to say something." The room went quiet. "Failed. Not just as a security guard, but as a person. I judged someone by his clothes, and I embarrassed all of us. I know I can't erase what I did, but I can start doing things differently, starting now." No one spoke. Then Luis stepped forward and said, "Starting now sounds like a good place." Emily nodded. That same evening, a letter arrived at Leclerc. It was handwritten, addressed to the kind ones. Emily opened it slowly. Asterisk, "To the people who made me feel human again, thank you. I've had a rough year. I didn't know how much I needed to feel seen. That night changed my life." Asterisk, Emily folded the letter and placed it beside the napkin. Keanu had once left her, she whispered. "This is bigger than one night." In homes around the world, people were talking about it. A teenager showed it to his mum. A teacher read Keanu's words to her class. An elderly man in a hospital said, "Now that's a real hero." The clip became more than viral, it became a reminder that even in a world of fast scrolls and shallow likes, something real could still break through. One act of kindness, one man's humility, one restaurant that learned to see people differently. Emily stepped outside for air that night. She looked up at the stars and imagined Lorraine, Keanu's grandmother, watching from somewhere above. "I think he made you proud," she whispered. And deep down, She knew this wasn't just a story, it was a movement. It was 2 weeks after the video of Keanu Reeves at Leclerc broke the internet. The initial buzz had quieted, but the ripple effects were far from over. Inside the restaurant, things had truly changed. Staff members treated every guest with quiet care. Regulars returned not for status, but for the warmth. Tourists came just to feel that energy they'd seen online. The place wasn't just famous, it was different. But the biggest change wasn't in the guests. It was in the staff. Luis now walked through the kitchen with his head up. He was still the dishwasher, but everyone now greeted him by name. And for the first time, the manager put a tip jar by the kitchen door with a note that read, "For the people who work hardest but are seen the least." He smiled every time he passed it. Emily, meanwhile, had been promoted. Sterling called her into his office one morning and said, "You were the only one who got it right from the start. From now on, you're our floor manager." She blinked. "Wait, what? You've got heart, and we need that more than ever." Emily had never had a title before. But it wasn't the title that made her proud. It was knowing that kindness had led her there. Still, there was someone else who hadn't said a word since the incident, Keanu. Until one morning, when a small package arrived at the restaurant, there was no return address. Just a card, handwritten, attached to a neatly wrapped box. Emily opened it with shaking hands. Luis stood beside her. Marcus watched from a distance. Inside, there was a slim wooden case. She opened it slowly. It was a gold-plated name tag. It read, "Emily. You saw first." She swallowed hard, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Luis looked at the card. He read it aloud. "Thank you for reminding me what this place was supposed to be. Use it to remind others." The next day, something even more unexpected happened. Sterling called a staff meeting. Everyone stood in the dining area, unsure of what to expect. He cleared his throat. "I received a phone call this morning from someone who refuses to be named. But you all know who he is." He paused, glancing around. "He's made an anonymous donation to our employee fund. It covers 1 year of rent for every full-time staff member." Gasps filled the room. Luis dropped the dish towel in his hands. "You're kidding," Sterling smiled. "Nope. And that's not all. He's also starting a scholarship in Name his grandmother. 4 hospitality students from underprivileged backgrounds." Emily pressed her hand to her mouth. It was real. It was all real. No cameras, no press, just quiet generosity. Later that night, as Emily stood at the host stand, Eli walked through the door again. She lit up. "You're back." He nodded. "Got a job that's amazing," she said. He smiled shyly. "The soup kitchen posted about my story after the video went viral. A cafe owner saw it. I start Monday. They're even helping me find housing." She beamed. "I'm so proud of you." "I brought something," he said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a folded piece of paper. On it was a drawing, simple and childlike. A picture of her, Luis, and Keanu, standing under the Leclerc sign, with hearts floating above their heads. "I know it's not much. It's everything," she said, choking back tears. As he turned to leave, she called after him, "Eli, yeah. If you ever need a meal, you've got a place here." He smiled. "And if you ever need coffee, I'll be across the street." Marcus stepped up beside her as Eli left. He watched the boy disappear into the night. "I can't stop thinking about how close I was to pushing him away," Marcus said. Emily turned to him. "You didn't. You're changing." He exhaled slowly. "He changed me. You changed you," she corrected gently. "He just reminded you how that night, the staff gathered for their shift meal after closing." Laughter filled the kitchen. People shared their own stories of feeling unseen, unvalued. Emily raised a glass of iced tea, to kindness. Luis tapped his glass against hers. To Keanu, Marcus added, and to second chances. No one needed to say more. Across town, Keanu sat by a small lake. The locket still rested in his pocket, warm from his touch. He thought about Lorraine, about what she would have said. "You did well, boy," he imagined her whispering. "But don't stop here. He took out a notebook and began writing. Asterisk places that need healing. People who need hope. Leave something behind. A card, a napkin, a name tag, something quiet but lasting. Asterisk, he didn't want applause. He didn't need headlines. All he wanted was to pass on what had once been given to him, a chance to matter, and at Leclerc. That chance had already taken root. It was no longer just a restaurant, it was a place where one act of kindness had become a chain reaction, and it was just getting started. Asterisk, the days passed. Leclerc no longer needed headlines to stay full. It had become something rarer than fame, a symbol, a place where a quiet man reminded the world what it meant to truly see each other. One evening, as the golden sunset filtered through the restaurant windows, Emily placed fresh menus on the tables. The room felt warmer now, filled with the laughter of new guests and the quiet peace of familiar ones. Luis wiped down the counter, humming softly. He had grown more confident, but never louder. His kindness had always been his strength. Marcus, now more present and respectful, opened the door. For an elderly woman with trembling hands, she smiled up at him. "Thank you, young man." "My pleasure, ma'am," he said. Genuinely. At the hostess stand, Emily found an envelope taped beneath the ledge. It hadn't been there earlier. No one saw who left it. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a small wooden coin. The coin read, "Leave light wherever you walk." She unfolded the note. The handwriting was familiar, calm/steady. Asterisk, "Dear Emily, I've moved on to another city, another stop. But I couldn't leave without saying goodbye. What you gave me wasn't just a kind welcome. You gave me faith in people again. Keep leading with heart. This world forgets sometimes, and people like you help it remember. K. Asterisk, Emily pressed the note to her chest. Her throat tightened. She turned and called out, "Luis." He hurried over. "Everything okay?" She held out the wooden coin and the letter. As he read, his smile grew soft. "He's gone, isn't he?" Luis asked. Emily nodded. "But not really." Luis placed the coin in the tip jar by the kitchen, where everyone could see it. "Let's make sure we all remember," he said. That night, something special happened. Asterisk, a small group of teenagers walked in, loud and distracted. One wore designer sunglasses indoors. Another scrolled on his phone, barely noticing where he was. Emily approached, patient and warm. "Welcome to Leclerc." They looked around, unimpressed. Then one of them pointed. "Hey, isn't this the place where another said where that movie guy gave that big speech?" Emily smiled gently. "It's a place where something important happened. Would you like to see where?" They nodded, curious now. She led them to a wall near the back. On it was a simple framed photo, a still shot from the security camera. Keanu standing by the host stand.com, and centered. Below it, a brass plaque read, "Kindness doesn't need a name, it just needs a heart." The teenagers stood quietly, reading. One of them looked up and asked, "Did you meet him?" Emily nodded. "I did, but more importantly, I listened to him." Another boy, barely 16, murmured, "I wish more people were like that." Emily replied, "You can be." The room was silent for a beat. And then, just like that, they sat down quietly at their table. Across town, in a quiet park beneath a giant oak, Keanu sat on a weathered bench. The locket sat open in his hand. The photo of his grandmother looking up at him. "I kept the promise, Lorraine," he whispered. "I gave your dream back to the world." He looked around. Children played. Couples walked by, hands intertwined. A jogger paused to tie her shoe and smiled at him without recognition. He loved moments like that. Moments where he could just be present. A child approached, maybe 6 years old, holding a paper airplane. "Want to see it fly?" Keanu smiled. "I'd love to." The boy threw it into the breeze. It soared high, looped once, and landed at Keanu's feet. He picked it up, inspected it like a treasure, and said, "That was perfect." The boy grinned. "Thanks, Mr. Ven ran back to his parents. Keanu sat for a while longer, then stood. He left the paper airplane on the bench and walked away, unnoticed, back at Leclerc. As the night ended, the staff gathered again for their closing meal. Sterling now joined them. His guard down. Marcus raised a glass. To everyone who learned something. Louise raised his. To everyone who taught something. Emily, holding the wooden coin, said softly, to those who leave light. They clinked their glasses gently. The restaurant dimmed. Chairs were tucked in. Lights flicked off. And near the door, a small frame caught the last glow of the lamp. Keanu's image, silent, kind, and eternal, watching over the place. He changed. Not with fame, but with presence. A new customer approached the entrance, just as Emily was locking up. Oh, are you closed? She paused, smiled. For tonight, yes, but come back tomorrow. We'd love to have you. He nodded. I heard this place has heart. She nodded back. It does. Because someone reminded us how to find it. He turned to leave. And as Emily pulled the door closed behind her, Louise whispered, You think he'll come back someday? Emily looked up at the stars and said, Maybe not in person. But he never really left. A breeze moved through the street. Quiet, gentle. And somewhere, in another town, a new stranger walked into a small cafe. Dressed simply, carrying nothing but silence and a smile. And someone paused and noticed. The end.